Welcome to episode 148 of Bible Talk, a podcast brought to you by 9 Marks and Southern Seminary. 9 Marks exists to help pastors build healthy churches. I'm just drinking this smoothie and it's made my mouth all filmy, so this is going to be interesting. If you would like to help us create more resources like this, please consider supporting us at 9marks.org/talk. Southern Seminary exists to educate, train, and equip gospel ministers for a lifetime of faithful service. For more, you should visit Well, you'll get some of that, but for more, you should visit sbts.edu. Excuse me. My name is Alex Duke, and with me are my two friends,
Sam Amati,
Jim Hamilton.
Last week, we discussed the sad end of Hezekiah's reign, and we learned while discussing the end of his reign that even the best kings are not good enough. In fact, at the end of the last episode, we ended up on a really high note, just waiting for what Jesus can provide. Since we've been talking through the end of 2 Kings in chapter 18, the author has focused on Judah, right? Northern Israel has already been dispatched by Assyria. Judah has fended off Assyria, right? It's Assyria, not Syria.
That's right.
Yes, Assyria. They fended off Assyria for now through the miraculous intervention of the Lord. And that's sort of what Hezekiah may have been boasting about, which got him in trouble. Today, we're going to talk about 2 Kings 21. And this descent of Judah is getting turbulent. And as we move from Hezekiah, a good king, we're going to move to Manasseh, who I think it's safe to say is a very, 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 very bad king.
Yeah, that's right.
Worse than maybe even any king of Israel. So 2 Kings chapter 21. Let's read through the chapter. It's not too long. We'll start with the first 9 verses in which the author of Kings more or less kind of details his crimes, details all the bad stuff. I mean, there's really not a single shred of good that he does, at least that we get reported. So who wants to take the lead?
I'll go for it. Yeah, Manasseh, verse 1, was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. So this is an extraordinarily long reign in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. So that in itself is telling, because what it's showing is this account that we're about to read. We've seen something like this in the past. It's like the re-Canaanization of the land, that it's moving from godliness back to paganism. And just as the Lord drove out those people, right, there's a subtle hint in that phrase that because of Hezekiah's practices, because of Manasseh's practices, because of the wickedness of Judah, the Lord's going to drive them out in the way that he did the Canaanites before them. Verse 3, so now comes the account of Manasseh's sins. He rebuilt the high places that Hezekiah his father had destroyed. Second, he erected altars for Baal and made an Asherah as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. Third, and he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. Fourth, and he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem will I put my name. Fifth, and he built altars for all the host of heaven in the 2 courts of the house of the Lord. Sixth, and he burned his son as an offering. Seventh,
it saves the worst for,
yeah,
maybe not last, but
seventh, and he used fortune telling and omens and dealt with mediums and with necromancers. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. So what I want to point out about this list of Manasseh's sins is I think that they're structured chiastically. So if you look at verse 2 and verse 7, you have he did much evil in the sight of the Lord, or he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord.
2 and verse 6, you mean?
2 and the end of verse 6.
Yep.
That's right. And then 3 and the end of verse 6, I think, are corresponding, as are the end of 3 and the beginning of 6. And then you'll notice at the end of 3, he worshipped all the host of heaven. Beginning of 5, he built altars for all the host of heaven. So there's correspondence there. And then I think what's at the center of this chiasm is he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. So, you have there at the center of the chiasm this mention of the name of the Lord. You have this reference to the Lord speaking. This is the only account of the Lord speaking in all of this, this list of sins that Manasseh has. So what we see happening here is something that has really never happened in the history of Judah. We saw Ahaz kind of do some things to the temple, but nobody has ever erected altars to false gods in the temple. I mean, that's what's going on here.
They've made false. I feel like they have. They've made false temples, but never.
Well, I don't remember all of the details of what goes on with Ahaz, but he rearranges the furniture. He does all this stuff, according to what he saw in Assyria. But I don't think Ahaz put altars to false gods in Yahweh's temple.
He made an altar after the pattern of the god of the foreign king that he made an alliance with.
But does he put it in the temple?
Well, he removed the altar from in front of the house of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering. The bronze altar. So 2 Kings 16:14, the bronze altar that was before the Lord, he removed from the front of the house, from the place between his altar and the house of the Lord, and put it on the north side of his altar. And his altar was the one after the pattern of that of Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria.
Okay.
Is he trying to? I can't remember. Sorry. Is he worshiping Yahweh in that way, or other gods in the way of?
I think he's
pagan?
doing whatever it takes to get an alliance with Tiglath-Pileser.
Sure. Yeah.
But this is certainly an escalation to what Ahaz did, right? You've got these altars to all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord, and again, that's the center of the chiasm. This is where the Lord has put his name. So this is an assault on the glory of God and on the name of God. This is taking God's name in vain. And also another interesting thing about this list of sins is the way that it moves from outside the temple to inside the temple. So it begins with him building high places that his father destroyed, and him erecting altars in the land, and then worshiping the host of heaven, until finally he's building altars in the house of the Lord, and he's building altars to the host of the heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. So moving from outside the temple to inside the temple. So again, what's the role of the Davidic king? Well, the Davidic king is supposed to be a temple builder. The good kings in Israel, as we're about to see with Josiah, they do work on the temple and they restore the temple. And so it's an inversion of the Davidic king to be, a person like this who tears the temple down with idolatry and makes it what it was never intended to be. It's supposed to be the place where God's name resides, and now it's a place where these idols reside.
We good to go, Jim?
Yeah, great work, Sam.
Verse 7.
Verse 7, and the carved image of Asherah that he had made, he set in the house of which the Lord said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house.
So this is basically to like deepen the knife, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's like almost like showing, I don't know, like a man, God forbid, committing adultery while sort of intercutting between like his marriage ceremony, right? Like this is what it was supposed to be, and it's horrible that he's doing it because of what the Lord had said.
Yeah, it is interesting that in both verse 4 and verse 7, you have these references to what the Lord has said previously about the temple, which I think just kind of further clarifies for us that Manasseh's wickedness is with regard to temple worship and with regard to the way that he's polluting the temple. This is high-handed rebellion against the Lord himself. So he took the Asherah which he had made, and he set it in the house which the Lord God has said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Judah, I will put my name forever. So I think I would need to go back and check this again. I checked it at one point. I think that word put is the Hebrew word seem, which is the same word for set in verse 7. So Manasseh sets the Asherah in the house of the Lord, whereas the Lord said he was going to set his name there forever. Verse 8, and I will not cause the feet of Israel to wander anymore out of the land that I gave to their fathers, if only they will be careful to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them. But they did not listen, and Manasseh led them astray to do more evil than the nations had done, whom the Lord had destroyed before the people of Israel. So this is an ominous, foreshadowing of what's to come.
Yeah, I mean the detailed crimes are bad, and the chapter continues on with basically the sentencing, which will not surprise us. So, I mean, Sam, you can keep taking the lead. The next chunk is 10 to 18,
Sure.
Where we get the sentence for what they've done.
Jim, did you have any comments about 7 to 9?
Nope. I'm
Okay.
happy.
Verse 10, and the Lord said by his servants the prophets, because Manasseh, king of Judah, has committed these abominations and has done these things more evil than all that the Amorites did, who were before him, and has made Judah also to sin with his idols. Therefore, thus says the Lord. So just a couple of comments here. It's interesting here, the reference to the Amorites.
Is that from like Genesis where he says?
That's exactly right.
When
this is on your brain because you just wrote a book about this.
A year ago I wrote it, but is that when he's sleeping?
Yeah, that's right.
Genesis 15?
Yes, Genesis 15. So the Amorites.
Some things do stick in the brain.
The Amorites are explicitly mentioned in Genesis 15. Let me
Verse
find
16.
Verse 16. And they shall come back here, that is the Israelites, in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So, what this is doing is the author of Kings is painting Manasseh and Israel under Manasseh as, like they're new Amorites, which means they have to be expunged from the land. And just as, the Lord was patient and allowed the, Amorite iniquity to fill up before he brought judgment, so he's done the same thing with Israel, but now, their iniquity is filling up, and the day of judgment and of vengeance is drawing near. So this is a really interesting callback to Genesis 15:16. The Amorites did who were before him, and has made Judah also to sin with his idols. So at least from, what I looked at, I don't think this phrase has been used previously in Kings with regard to Judah. It's been used a lot with regard to Israel. Israel's kings made Israel to sin. This is the first time that we have a king making Judah to sin. So, Judah has gone the way of its northern brethren. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I am bringing upon Jerusalem and Judah such disaster that the ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle. So, in verse 11, Manasseh did more evil, the Hebrew ra'ah, and then the Lord is going to bring ra'ah, evil, upon Jerusalem and Judah. So there's interesting correspondence there. That the ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle. I think this is a phrase that's used, I'm studying 1 Samuel right now.
Chapter 3, verse 11.
This is used in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 11, with regard to God's judgment on Shiloh. So 1 Samuel 3, I'm in chapter 2. 1 Samuel 3,
what happened
11.
To your Bible?
Well, the cover fell off. Then the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the two ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end, meaning the judgment that was going to come against Eli's house. Any other comments there on the relationship to 1 Samuel 3:11?
You're doing great, Sam.
Jimmy, okay?
I'm doing great, yeah.
And I will stretch over Jerusalem the measuring line of Samaria and the plumb line of the house of Ahab. Now, this is interesting because measuring lines and plumb lines are typically things that you use to build. But in this case, the measuring line of Samaria, well, Samaria has been destroyed. And the plumb line...
That was the capital of the northern kingdom.
That's the capital of the northern kingdom. And the plumb line of the house of Ahab, well, the house of Ahab has been destroyed. So it's this, ironic mixing of metaphors where the Lord's going to use the measuring line and the plumb line essentially instead of to plot out Judah's building or rebuilding to measure out the destruction, and the extent of the destruction that he's going to mete out against them. And I will wipe Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. And I will forsake the remnant of my heritage and give them into the hand of their enemies, and they shall become a prey and spoiled of their enemies, because they have done what is evil in my sight and have provoked me to anger since the day the fathers came out of Egypt, even to this day. Which is to say, this interesting callback to Egypt, that the Lord's going to reverse the Exodus. The Lord is going to undo what he did in the Exodus and send them back outside the land. And Manasseh, even though we're going to have, Ammon and Josiah, and then Josiah's son Jehoiakim. This is the final straw. This is what sets in motion the eventual exile of the southern kingdom.
Now, is it correct to say that these are the Deuteronomy curses?
Oh, absolutely.
Being just, even though there's not exact quoting from Deuteronomy, it's very much the substance of. The chapters are escaping me. My head. 27, 20.
Yeah, the covenant curses at the end of the book 27, 28. What is shaping the worldview of the biblical author? Well, it's the book of Deuteronomy. Yeah. That's what he's drawing from. That's the context out of which he writes and out of which he expects his readers to read the book.
Yeah.
That they're going to have that in the background to be able to understand these judgments.
And we've seen little interruptions of the Deuteronomy curses.
Right.
Even the classic one is the bear eating the young men. Right.
Mhm.
People are like, oh, that's so crazy. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's unexpected, but it's very much in line with Deuteronomy, which talks about being eaten by wild beasts. So so it's just helpful to remember the Bible is not like this siloed thing that's not connected. This is telling all the same story that we started with 4 years ago,
Right.
5 years ago when we started doing this thing. It's their sins are coming home to roost, and the Lord is keeping his word.
Yeah, and Moses prophesied that this would happen. Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 30. He said that the people are going to go into exile, and then the Lord's going to deliver them in a new
Just like in
Exodus.
Genesis 15, the Lord tells Abraham while he's sleeping that like they're going to go into under
gonna
the
go
thumb
to
of
Egypt, right.
Egypt, right?
Mhm.
So he always is telling he's giving the people the
Right, the program of redemptive history is very clear.
yeah.
Verse 16, moreover, Manasseh shed very much innocent blood, which recalls Ahab and Naboth's vineyard and the violence and the bloodshedding that occurred there, till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to another, besides the sin that he made Judah to sin, so that they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And then we have the ordinary conclusion of Manasseh's reign. The rest of the acts of Manasseh, all that he did, and the sin that he committed, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Manasseh slept with his fathers and was buried in the garden of his house, in the garden of Uzzah, and Ammon his son reigned in his place. There's probably some significance to the being buried in the garden of his house, which I haven't totally sorted out yet.
I think the
Jim's thoughts on
ESV
that.
notes said that that's outside Jerusalem.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's
Well, what's interesting, the last thing I want to point out about Manasseh is we have the synoptic account, the corollary account in 2 Chronicles 33, which records that Manasseh actually repents of his sin. And he tears down these altars and he gives himself to the worship of Yahweh. That's not recorded in 2 Kings. And so it's an important, as we compare Chronicles and Kings, noting these types of differences helps us discern what the argument and the purpose is of each book. 2 Kings isn't giving us that story because 2 Kings is doing something different than 2 Chronicles. Kings is giving us an account for why Israel went into exile, and why the judgments of Deuteronomy, these covenant curses, have come against them. So, the author of Kings doesn't record that, even though we learned in 2 Chronicles that Manasseh actually repents at the end of his life. Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep checking in.
All right, let's go to Ammon reigns in Judah. Ammon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. So we go from a 55-year reign? Is that what Manasseh?
Yeah, I think so.
55 years to 2 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, the daughter of Haruz of Jotbah. And here it is again. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as Manasseh his father had done. He walked in all the way in which his father walked, and he served the idols that his father served and worshiped them. So even though Manasseh repented at the end of his life, the course of his early life is what he bequeathed to his son. He abandoned the Lord, the God of his fathers, and did not walk in the way of the Lord. And the servants of Ammon conspired against him and put the king to death in his house. But the people of the land struck down all those who had conspired against King Ammon, and the people of the land made Josiah his son king in his place. And that's the whole reign of Ammon. If you want to, what was significant about Ammon's life? He was a terrible person who did evil in the sight of the Lord, who was then, dethroned, executed by his own servants. And then verse 25, the ordinary conclusion. Now, the rest of the acts of Ammon that he did, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And he was buried in the tomb in the garden of Uzzah, and Josiah his son reigned in his place.
I was just seeing if Ammon repented, but I don't think he did.
I don't believe that's true. Yeah. One final comment about Ammon and this conspiracy against him by his servants that does recall Joash. Joash, who is a good king, but his servants arose and struck him down, leading to the reign of Jehoahaz, his son. So, it's just, there may be some sort of structural significance to this for the Book of Kings. It may be the author just kind of showing us, look, this is what happens in Israel. You have a good king, you have a bad king. They both end up with conspiracies. They both end up, with servants who kill them. But it is interesting that there is this correspondence with Joash, because there's going to be other correspondences between Joash and Josiah in the next chapter, because both of them are involved in temple rebuilding work and reconstruction of the temple. So it also may just be part of this picture of bringing Joash back into the storyline because of these correspondences that are going to occur between Josiah and Joash.
So we've got like 3 chapters left.
That's right.
22.
Yeah, so two chapters on Josiah,
yeah,
and then the concluding chapter.
Yeah, so 3 chapters left, and the sentence has already been given. They're going to be executed, sort of, in a manner of speaking, just like Judah. They're going to be exiled, and so we might expect that to happen immediately. And what's so wild about the next chunk of Kings is that that's not at all what happens.
Yeah,
God's providence is surprising and unusual. And what we're going to see in the next episode is the story of King Josiah, who doesn't reverse everything. He's not able to do that, but he does bring a surprising ray of hope into a hopeless situation. So we'll talk about that next episode. Thank you for listening. Always remember Psalm 111, verse 2, great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them.
For more articles, books, and podcasts, please visit ninemarks.org.